It was 2:15 in the morning when Steph Curry found himself alone in the bathroom of his presidential suite at the Four Seasons in San Francisco, tears streaming down his face, while holding the Finals MVP trophy he had dreamed of his entire life. Outside the 23rd floor window, the city sparkled like a constellation of diamonds, but all Steph could think about was a broken promise made 25 years ago by two 8-year-old boys who had sworn they would conquer the world, together or not conquer anything at all. Just 15 blocks away, in a dark alley behind an abandoned McDonald's, Marcus Williams was wrapping himself in wet cardboard, trying to protect himself from San Francisco's cold wind, using old newspaper as a blanket and a torn backpack as a pillow. In the pocket of his worn jacket, a cell phone with a cracked screen showed notifications about Steph Curry's historic victory. But Marcus had learned long ago that some pains are too big to fit on a small screen. To understand how the most glorious night of Steph Curry's life coincided with just another night of cold and hunger for the man who was once his best friend, how two boys who started exactly in the same place arrived at destinations so opposite they seemed to exist on different planets. We need to go back in time to Charlotte, North Carolina, summer of 1996, when two boys discovered that great dreams are born not from individual ambition, but from friendship that believes that impossible is just a word adults use when they stopped dreaming. You can notice that sometimes the most precious memories of our lives are those that remind us of when we were pure possibility, when the future was a blank page, and the only thing that mattered was having someone beside us to share the adventure of discovering who we could become. Steph Wardell Curry II was 8 years old when he met Marcus Williams on a Thursday afternoon that would forever change the course of both their lives. It was late May, school had ended, and Charlotte's heat made the asphalt shine like water, while Steph dribbled a worn basketball on the small hoop his father Dell had installed in the family garage. The rhythmic sound of the ball hitting the concrete echoed through the quiet street, when a thin boy in an oversized T-shirt appeared on the sidewalk, watching with curiosity mixed with admiration. Marcus Williams had moved to the house next door just 2 days before, his few boxes still stacked in the yard of a rented house his single mother could barely afford, working double shifts as a nurse. "Do you play every day?" Marcus asked, approaching the low fence that separated the properties. Steph stopped dribbling, surprised to have an audience. "Every chance I get," he responded with a shy smile that would become his trademark. "My dad says if you want to be good at something, you have to practice until it becomes automatic." "Can I try?" Marcus asked. And there was something in the hope in his voice that made Steph immediately throw the ball over the fence. Something that touches deeply is observing how true friendships are born in moments of spontaneous generosity, when a child chooses to share their favorite toy with a stranger, simply because they recognize the same burning desire in another person's eyes. Marcus caught the ball with reverence, as if he were holding a treasure. His first shots were clumsy, too strong, too far left, but Steph didn't laugh. Instead, he jumped the fence and began teaching how to position the feet, how to bend the wrist, how to find the rhythm that transformed movement into music. "Like this," Steph demonstrated. "Imagine there's an invisible rope connecting you to the basket. Don't force the ball there. Let the rope pull you." During the next 3 hours, they alternated between shots and conversations that revealed how similar they were despite being different. Steph, son of an NBA professional player, had grown up around basketball. But Marcus, whose father had abandoned the family when he was 5 years old, was discovering not just passion for the sport, but the first positive father figure in his life through Steph's gentle guidance. My family never had money to sign me up for anything, Marcus confessed while attempting another shot. But I always wanted to try basketball. It seems, I don't know, like flying without leaving the ground. How is it possible that an 8-year-old child can articulate something that professional players take years to understand? Marcus had captured the essence of what made basketball more than a sport. It was a form of transcendence, a way to transform physical limitations into infinite possibilities. "Do you want to play with me tomorrow?" Steph asked when the sun began to set, painting Charlotte's sky in shades of orange and pink. "Every day, if you'll let me," Marcus responded, and there was an implicit promise in those words that went far beyond basketball. During the weeks that followed, a routine was established that would become the foundation of both their lives. Every morning at 7, Marcus appeared in the Curry garage with the energy of someone who had discovered not just purpose, but family. They practiced drills that Steph learned watching his father, invented games that tested the limits of creativity, and dreamed big about a future that seemed not just possible, but inevitable when shared. One day, Steph said, during one of their morning sessions, "I'm going to play in the NBA like my dad." "And I'll be there with you," Marcus responded without hesitation, as if there was no other possibility in the universe. Robert Kim, a neighbor who always passed by during his morning walk, stopped to watch the boys practicing. "You two have something special," he commented. "It's not just talent, it's chemistry. That's how real greatness begins." Naturally, this leads us to understand that truly great dreams are rarely born in isolation, but in partnership with someone who not only shares the vision, but amplifies it through mutual faith in what both can become together. As summer progressed, both boys' skills flourished, but in different ways. Steph developed a natural touch for shots that defied his age, while Marcus showed instinct for defense and passes that created opportunities Steph didn't even know existed. They weren't just practice partners. They were a complete system, each compensating for the others. Weak points and amplifying strengths. James Wilson, coach of the local youth league, discovered them during an impromptu game at the park. "You play like you're one person with 4 arms," he said, amazed. "I've never seen connectivity like this between children so young." It was James who suggested they sign up for the youth league as a duo. "Individual talents are common," he explained to the parents. "But true partnership, that's rare. That's what creates champions." The proposal excited both boys, but created the first real tension between families. While Del Curry could easily pay the registration fee and equipment for Steph, the Williams family struggled to make ends meet with Diana Williams's nurse salary. Pride prevented her from asking for help, but concern was evident in the way she counted coins every night at the kitchen table. It was Steph who solved the problem with simplicity that only a child could have. "Dad," he said during dinner, "if Marcus can't play, I'm not going to play either. It doesn't make sense without him." Del Curry, recognizing a valuable lesson about loyalty and friendship, discreetly offered to sponsor Marcus. "We all need help sometimes," he said to Diana Williams. "Let me give back for all the mornings your son has kept Steph motivated and happy." Have you ever wondered how simple acts of generosity can change entire life trajectories? Dell's decision to include Marcus not only allowed the friendship to continue, it planted seeds of gratitude and loyalty that would grow into unbreakable bonds between the boys, but also created Marcus's first experience of how money could be a solution or barrier to dreams. The first season in the Youth League was a revelation. Steph and Marcus dominated the competition not through superior individual talent, but through mutual understanding that seemed telepathic. Steph knew exactly where Marcus would be for the perfect pass. Marcus anticipated when Steph needed a screen, or, when he should, receive the ball in a specific position. Anthony Jang, father of another league player, observed during the championship game, "These boys don't play basketball, they dance basketball. It's like they have a secret language that only they understand." After victory in the championship, while celebrating with pizza and soda, the defining moment of friendship happened. Steph, holding the individual MVP trophy he had won, looked at Marcus and made a gesture that revealed depth of character, uncommon for a 9-year-old child. "This trophy is ours," Steph said, extending the statuette to Marcus. "I couldn't have won it without you. Actually, I didn't even want to win it without you." Marcus, tears in his eyes, pushed the trophy back. "No, man, you deserve this. But thank you for making me feel like I deserve to be here beside you." What impresses most is how a moment of mutual humility can reveal the strength of connection that transcends competition or individual recognition, showing that true greatness is often measured not by what we conquer, but by what we're willing to share. It was that night, sitting in the Curry garage under Charlotte's starry sky, that the most important promise of their lives was made. They had been talking about dreams of playing in college, about the possibility of professional careers, about how incredible it would be if they could continue playing together forever. "Marcus," Steph said, voice carrying seriousness uncommon for a 9-year-old boy, "I want to make a promise with you." "What kind of promise?" "A promise that we'll go to the NBA together or not at all, that we'll never leave one behind. That one's success is both's success." Marcus extended his hand, and they shook with a force that sealed the most significant pact than any professional contract. "Together or not at all," Marcus repeated. "Forever." "Forever," Steph confirmed. They cut their fingers with Steph's small knife and mixed drops of blood, a childish ritual that seemed sacred under the starlight. It wasn't just about basketball, it was about loyalty, about chosen family, about the promise that no matter how high one could fly, they would never forget who was holding their wings when they learned to leave the ground. Naturally, this leads us to understand that promises made in childhood innocence often carry moral weight that persists far beyond the ability to fulfill them, creating a foundation of guilt or gratitude that shapes decisions decades later. As years passed and they grew from boys to teenagers, the promise remained central to both their lives. But reality began creating cracks that neither had anticipated. Steph continued living in stability. Own house, father with established career, resources for equipment and additional training. Marcus, on the other hand, watched his mother struggle increasingly with bills that seemed to grow faster than her nurse salary. During high school, differences became more pronounced. Steph had transformed into a phenomenon that defied logic, doing things on the court that college players struggled to achieve. His three-point shots came from distances that coaches considered irresponsible until they saw them go in consistently. His ability to create his own shots had attracted attention from scouts from practically every major university in the country. Marcus continued being a solid, intelligent player who understood every nuance of the game. He was the team's best defender, most creative passer, emotional leader who kept everyone together. But in a world where recruiters looked for magic, Marcus offered only excellence, and excellence without brilliance rarely opens doors that transcendent talent considers automatic. "Curry is playing at a completely different level," Timothy Walker, Duke University scout, commented during the state semifinal game. "He's not just playing against high school boys, He's playing like he's seeing a game that no one else can see. You can notice that sometimes the people closest to us are the first to recognize our exceptional greatness, and also the first to understand that this greatness can create distances that no friendship, however deep, can cross. During halftime of that game, Marcus had a moment of clarity that would change everything. Sitting on the bench, watching Steph be surrounded by college coaches eager to talk, he understood that the promise they had made was becoming a chain that could drag both down. Steph, by feeling guilty about leaving his friend behind, and himself by clinging to a dream that his financial reality made increasingly impossible. After victory in the state championship, the third consecutive title that Steph had led with Marcus as silent captain, the moment both had feared finally arrived. 5 major universities had offered full scholarships to Steph: Duke, North Carolina, Virginia Tech, VCU, and Davidson. For Marcus, there was only casual interest from 2 smaller schools and a vague possibility of walk-on at a Division II program his family simply couldn't afford. "It doesn't make sense," Steph said when they learned about the offers, frustration evident in his voice. "You're a better defender than me, better passer, better leader. How don't they see that?" Marcus forced a smile he had practiced for months, anticipating exactly this conversation. "Man, you're special in a way I'll never be, and that's okay. My job was always to make you shine. And look where we got. How is it possible that a 17-year-old person can demonstrate such emotional maturity and selflessness?" Marcus was articulating a painful truth that many adults take decades to accept, that sometimes loving someone means celebrating their greatness, even when it highlights our own limitations. It was during Steph's visit to Davidson College campus that the first big lie of the friendship was told. Steph had called Marcus excitedly after the campus tour, describing the Wan's basketball program, academic quality, and how much he wished Marcus could be there with him. "They asked about you," Steph said. "Coach McKillop said if you were interested, they could consider offering a chance as a walk-on." Marcus felt his heart race with possibility, but also the crushing weight of financial reality. Walk-on meant paying for his own education while trying to earn a place on the team, a luxury that would cost more than his mother's annual salary. "That's incredible, man," Marcus lied, voice steady despite internal emotional turbulence. "But I've already decided I'm going to work and do community college here. I need to help my mom with the bills, you know? Someone has to be responsible." The lie was gentle, but still a lie that would plant seeds of guilt that would grow for decades. Marcus had spent sleepless nights researching financial possibilities, had considered student loans that would take decades to pay, had even secretly applied for night jobs to try to save money. But when he looked at Steph's genuine enthusiasm about Davidson, when he saw how much his friend wanted him to be there, Marcus made a decision that would define not just the next years, but the rest of his life. "Are you sure?" Steph asked, and there was relief and disappointment mixed in his voice. "Because I could choose a different school, a place where both of us could—" "No," Marcus interrupted firmly. "Steph, you're going to Davidson. It's perfect for you. And our friendship is bigger than any college campus. Naturally, this leads us to understand that sometimes the deepest sacrifices we make for people we love are those that remain invisible, hidden behind brave smiles and affirmations that choices that hurt us were made freely." The summer before Steph left for Davidson was a bittersweet mixture of prolonged farewell and denial about the reality of imminent separation. They still played in the garage every morning, still dreamed big about the future. But there was unspoken weight in every conversation. Steph departing for a world of infinite possibilities. Marcus staying in Charlotte for a world of prematurely adult family responsibilities. On the day Steph left for Davidson, Marcus got a job at the UPS warehouse working night shift, carrying literal weight that reflected the emotional weight he had chosen to carry. During the day, he attended community college classes, paying tuition with money he should have been saving for his own higher education. During the first months, they maintained contact religiously. Steph called every Tuesday night, sharing stories about training, games, college life. Marcus listened with genuine interest, asked the right questions, offered encouragement when Steph was going through adaptation difficulties, but never mentioned his own struggles. Double shifts, community college grades suffering from exhaustion, growing pile of his mother's medical bills. Gradually, inevitably, calls became less frequent. Steph was living a life that consumed every moment: studies, training, games, college social life. Marcus was working 16 hours a day to help his family survive, often too tired for long conversations when Steph finally managed to call. "I feel like I'm losing my best friend," Steph confessed to Chris Martinez, roommate at Davidson, after a particularly difficult week where he hadn't been able to talk to Marcus. "Maybe you're just growing in different directions," Chris responded gently. "It doesn't mean the friendship meant less. It just means it's changing." Steph's first big success at Davidson, the game where he scored 30 points against Duke and drew national attention, should have been a moment of shared celebration. Instead, it became a painful symbol of how their lives had diverged. Steph called Marcus immediately after the game, excited, wanting to share the moment. But Marcus was working a double shift, couldn't talk, and when he finally returned the call hours later, the moment had passed. Steph was celebrating with the team, and Marcus was in the small apartment he shared with his sick mother, watching highlights on television like any other fan. "Congratulations, man," Marcus said when they finally connected. "I saw the news. You're on the right track." But both felt distance in the conversation, formality that had never existed before. Steph was becoming a national celebrity, and Marcus was becoming a statistic, a working-class young adult struggling to survive in an economy that offered fewer and fewer opportunities for people without college degrees. During Steph's college years, Marcus's life entered a downward spiral that he carefully hid from everyone, especially Steph. His mother was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes that became uncontrolled when she couldn't afford medications regularly. Marcus began working 3 different jobs: UPS during early morning, construction during the day, office cleaning during nights. When Steph was drafted by the Warriors in 2009, Marcus watched the draft ceremony on a broken television at a local bar where he worked as a janitor, crying tears of joy that no one saw. He tried to call to congratulate Steph, but couldn't complete the call, a mixture of pride, shame, and realization that the distance between their lives had become insurmountable. Something that touches deeply is recognizing how pride can become a prison that prevents us from seeking help from the people who love us most, especially when those people seem to have completely surpassed our capacity for equal relationship. During the next 15 years, while Steph built a legendary NBA career, Marcus experienced a slow but inexorable decline that reflects the brutal reality of millions of working-class Americans. Jobs that paid decent wages were automated or sent to other countries. Housing costs in Charlotte increased faster than wages. His mother needed increasingly expensive medical care until, in 2018, she died, leaving Marcus with medical debts that bankruptcy declaration couldn't completely eliminate. Without family, without college education, with destroyed credit history and health deteriorated by years of excessive physical work, Marcus found himself in a spiral that led to loss of housing in 2019. First, sleeping in the car that was repossessed 3 months later. Then, in shelters when he could get a spot. Finally, on the streets, carrying everything he owned in a worn backpack and discovering that American society has little patience or compassion for middle-aged men who have become invisible. Marcus had become a statistic that Steph probably saw in the news but never connected with a face he knew. Another homeless person in a national housing crisis that seemed abstract until it became personal. During these years on the streets, Marcus developed a survival routine that centered around two things: finding food and shelter, and following Steph's career whenever possible. In public libraries, he watched game highlights. In storefront windows of electronics stores, he stopped to see news about titles and records. In discarded newspaper headlines, he read about million-dollar contracts and historic achievements. Each of Steph's successes was a simultaneous source of vicarious joy and painful reminder of the promise they had made when they were children. Together or not at all. Steph had gone alone, and Marcus had been left behind in such a complete way that his existence seemed to have been erased from the world they once shared. Ryan Johnson, social worker who occasionally interacted with Marcus at shelters, observed, "He was different from the others, polite, gentle, always asking about other people." He mentioned a childhood friend who had made it, but never with bitterness, always with genuine pride. How is it possible that a person maintained genuine love and pride for someone whose success made their own failure more painful? Marcus had discovered that true love sometimes means celebrating another person's happiness, even when your own life is falling apart. It was during late 2023 that Marcus learned the Warriors were in the race for the finals again. And for the first time in years, he made a decision that would cost the last savings he had managed to gather by begging. He would go to San Francisco. He had no specific plan, didn't expect to see Steph personally. But something deep inside him said he needed to be present if Steph conquered another title. The trip from Charlotte to San Francisco, by bus and hitchhiking, took 3 weeks and all his strength. He arrived in the city 2 weeks before the finals, sleeping in parks and looking for food in restaurant trash, but determined to be present during the moment he knew would be the culmination of everything Steph had worked to achieve. During the finals, Marcus found a place in an alley 3 blocks from the AO arena where he could hear the crowd's roars and occasionally catch Wi-Fi signals from nearby businesses to follow the score on the cracked cell phone he had gotten from a charity donation. And so it was that, on the most glorious night of Steph Curry's career, 2 worlds that had begun as one met in the most devastating way possible. One in a presidential suite celebrating historic conquest, the other in a cold alley, discovering that some distances are too great to be crossed by nostalgia or love. It was June 15th, 2024. Exactly 15 years after Steph Curry had left for Davidson, when destiny decided it was time for 2 realities to collide. Steph had just conquered his 5th NBA title with historic performance, 42 points in the 7th and decisive game, including 8 3-point shots that left the crowd in delirium and analysts speechless. Inside the Chase Center, champagne flowed, confetti fell from the ceiling, family embraced Steph with tears of joy, and the finals MVP trophy was in his hands. Physical materialization of 2 decades of tireless work. Isha kissed his face. Daughters jumped in his arms. Dell cried with paternal pride, and the entire basketball universe was paying homage to the man who had redefined what was possible to do with a basketball. It was a moment that should have been pure happiness, ecstasy without mixture, complete validation of a life dedicated to perfection. But while holding the trophy and smiling for cameras, Steph felt an inexplicable emptiness in his chest. Amid the deafening roar of 20,000 people celebrating, the only voice he wanted to hear was absent. Outside the arena, in an alley that smelled of trash and despair, Marcus Williams was wrapped in a newspaper blanket he had found, trying to protect himself from the cold wind blowing from the bay. He had managed to hear the explosion of joy when the Warriors won, had seen fireworks through cracks between buildings, and now was crying. Not tears of sadness for his own situation, but tears of genuine joy, because the boy he once knew had finally reached the dream they had both shared. You can notice that sometimes the purest demonstrations of love happen in moments of greatest contrast, when a person who has lost everything still finds strength to celebrate the happiness of someone who has gained everything, proving that some bonds transcend any external circumstance. Marcus had spent the last 2 weeks surviving on San Francisco's streets, determined to be present during the historic moment in Steph's life, even if only as an invisible observer. He had slept in parks, looked for food in restaurant dumpsters, survived with wounded pride but unwavering determination to witness the culmination of a dream that had once belonged to both him and Steph. Daniel Patel, night security guard who made rounds in the area, had noticed Marcus during the last weeks. A man who was clearly homeless but who was polite, grateful for any small kindness, and who always asked about the Warriors game when he saw someone with a phone. "Man," Daniel had said the night before, "are you okay? It seems like this game means a lot to you." "My best friend is playing," Marcus had responded simply, without elaborating on the devastating complexity behind those 4 words. During the game, Marcus had managed to catch fragments of audio through his cracked cell phone, following Steph's historic performance, through sporadic updates when he could get Wi-Fi signal. Each point scored by Steph was a silent celebration in the dark alley. Each record broken was validation of faith that Marcus had maintained during 15 years of separation and personal decline. What impresses most is how true love sometimes manifests not through physical presence or public recognition, but through silent vigil, through private celebration of another person's successes, even when our own life is in ruins. When the game ended and the Warriors officially won the title, Marcus allowed himself a moment of solitary celebration in the alley. He whispered, "We did it," to no one in particular, using the plural pronoun that revealed how he still carried shared childhood dreams, how he still considered himself part of Steph's journey, even being physically and socially separated from it. But it was when he tried to get up to look for a warmer place to sleep that Marcus noticed a familiar figure walking toward the alley. Even in the dark, even after 15 years, even in the most unlikely circumstances, he immediately recognized the man who had been his first and best friend. Steph Curry, still in uniform covered with champagne and confetti, had left the arena looking for a moment of silent reflection away from the chaos of celebration. He needed fresh air, a moment to process the magnitude of what he had just conquered, space to understand why he felt incomplete amid complete triumph. Something deep inside him had insisted that he walk, that he search, although he didn't know what. And then he saw a familiar figure in the dark alley. Even in the shadows, even with Marcus visibly worn down by years of street life, Steph instantly recognized the posture, the way Marcus held his shoulders, the expression he had had 1,000 times when they were teenagers navigating the pressures of growing up. He recognized, but initially refused to believe what his eyes were seeing. "Marcus," Steph called, voice loaded with incredulity and instant emotional shock. Marcus froze, caught between the impulse to run and the impossibility of denying recognition. When their eyes met across the distance, 15 years of separation evaporated instantly, but were replaced by brutal consciousness of the distance their destinies had created. They were again two boys from Charlotte, who had promised to conquer the world together. Except now one of them was wearing an NBA champion uniform covered with celebration, confetti, and the other was wearing torn clothes covered with street dirt. "Oh my God, Marcus! What? You are—" Steph began, but words failed when he fully realized what he was seeing. His childhood best friend, the person who had shared first dreams and first hopes, was clearly living on the streets. "Hi, Steph," Marcus said gently, trying to smile despite tears that began to flow. "Congratulations, man. I heard part of the game. You were incredible." Steph approached slowly, as if sudden movement might make Marcus disappear like a mirage. When he got close enough to see details, dirty clothes, thin face, hands cracked by cold, torn backpack containing what were probably all of Marcus's worldly possessions, reality hit Steph like a devastating revelation. "Marcus, you're living on the street?" Steph asked, voice breaking with disbelief and instant guilt. "It's not as bad as it looks," Marcus lied gently. Same protective instinct he had used 15 years before to hide his own struggles. "I'm fine. And you, man, you conquered everything. Exactly like we always knew would happen. How is it possible that a person in a homeless situation, having lost everything, still finds strength to protect the feelings of someone who has everything?" Marcus was demonstrating the same selflessness that had characterized the friendship since childhood, putting Steph's emotional well-being above his own need for help. "No, you're not fine," Steph said, tears now flowing freely down his own face. "None of this is fine. Marcus, what happened? How did we get here?" "Life happened," Marcus responded with simplicity that carried the weight of 15 years of struggles. "You followed your destiny. I found mine." "This isn't your destiny," Steph said firmly, decision crystallizing in his mind with clarity that transcended any trophy or achievement. "This ends now. Tonight. I'm taking you with me." "Steph, you don't understand. I can't. I'm no longer the person you knew. These are your finals, your celebration. You can't—" "Marcus," Steph interrupted, voice carrying authority that came from years of leadership, but also tenderness that came from love that had never diminished. "Do you think any celebration means anything if my brother is suffering? Do you think any trophy is worth anything if the person who taught me to dream is sleeping on the street?" The silence that followed was filled with the weight of 15 years of separation, of dreams that had taken different paths, of a broken promise that both had carried as a secret burden. But it was also filled with recognition that underneath everything, success and failure, wealth and poverty, fame and invisibility, the connection that had formed between two 8-year-old boys in a Charlotte garage remained stronger than any external circumstance. "Come on," Steph said, extending his hand. "Let's go home." Something that touches deeply is observing how moments of true reunion happen not when people meet on equal footing, but when love is strong enough to transcend any difference of circumstance, when real friendship proves capable of surviving any test that life can present. Marcus looked at Steph's extended hand, then up at the face of the man who had been the first person to believe he was worthy of dreams. After 15 years of prideful independence that had slowly turned into prideful desperation, he finally allowed himself to accept help he had refused to ask. 4. Together or not at all? Steph asked, echoing the promise they had made under Charlotte's stars when they were children. Together, Marcus whispered, taking Steph's hand and feeling, for the first time in years, that maybe the promise hadn't been broken after all, just delayed until the moment when both of them were ready to understand that true partnership means being willing to sacrifice to lift each other up, no matter how far apart life had taken them. And so, under the neon lights of San Francisco that sparkled like a different constellation from the stars that had witnessed the original promise, two 33-year-old men discovered that some bonds are stronger than success or failure, that true love sometimes means waiting years for the opportunity to make things right, and that the greatest victories are those that include the people who matter more than any individual achievement. During the days that followed, Steph quietly revolutionized not just Marcus's immediate circumstances, but his entire approach to using wealth and platform. He established Marcus in a nearby apartment, connected him with health care to address years of neglect, and most importantly, created a business partnership that recognized Marcus's street-smart wisdom and survival skills as valuable assets for community outreach programs. I spent 15 years learning about resilience in ways that business schools don't teach, Marcus said during his first official meeting as Steph's Director of Community Engagement. Maybe it's time to use those lessons to help other people who got lost the same way I did. Kenneth Jones, high school coach who had trained both years before, commented when he heard about the reunion, "I'm not surprised. True friendship doesn't disappear. It just waits for the right moment to be rediscovered. Those boys always knew they belonged together." 6 months after the devastating night that had brought them back together, Steph and Marcus stood again in the Charlotte garage where everything had begun. The basketball hoop was still there, slightly rusted but functional. They played for the first time together in years, not as celebrity and rescued homeless person, but as two men who had rediscovered the meaning of shared partnership. "Remember the promise we made?" Steph asked, dribbling the ball with familiarity that transcended time. "Together or not at all," Marcus responded, smiling for the first time in years without the weight of hidden shame. "Well," Steph said, passing the ball to Marcus with precision that hadn't been lost, "I think we finally kept it." Naturally, this leads us to understand that promises made in childhood innocence sometimes take decades to fulfill. But when love is genuine and commitment is true, even the greatest obstacles can be overcome when people are willing to make the necessary sacrifices to lift each other to a place where both can thrive. Marcus Williams Day was declared in Charlotte a year later, recognizing that behind every story of amazing individual success, there is often an untold story of sacrifice and support that made that success possible. During the ceremony, Marcus spoke publicly for the first time about his experience, his words carrying wisdom that comes only from years of observation and selfless love. "I learned that true friendship isn't about sharing successes when they come easily," he said to the moved audience. "It's about being willing to be present for people you love even when they can't be present for you, even when the world says you should give up on them." "Steph didn't rescue me," Marcus continued. "He simply remembered that rescue goes both ways. I spent years protecting his dreams from a distance. He spent one night bringing me close enough that we could protect each other's futures from up close." Benjamin Lewis, sports journalist who had followed Steph's career since Davidson, wrote in a retrospective, "The story of Steph Curry will be remembered for the records broken and championships won. But the story of Steph Curry and Marcus Williams will be remembered as proof that behind every great dream realized, there is always someone who chose to love enough to make that dream possible, even when it costs them everything. Great dreams are never conquered alone. There is always someone sacrificing in the shadow so that the light can shine. But when that light finally turns to recognize and include who was in the shadow, both discover that sharing brightness creates more intense and lasting luminosity than any individual success could ever produce, and that true friendship means never leaving anyone behind, no matter how long it takes to find the way back to each other.